I am Malachi King. I am 71 years old, and for the past 45 years, I have been a husband, a father, and apparently, a fool. I came home 4 days early from my trip to surprise my family for Christmas. Instead, I found my wife Denise weeping alone on our cold balcony, her face lit by the tree lights. Inside, my son and his in-laws were laughing, toasting with my best whiskey, and finalizing their plan to sell my house and put my wife in a nursing home. They didn't hear me arrive. They also didn't hear the locksmith I called, who arrived at 6 a.m. the next morning to change every lock on the property. Before I tell you what happened when my son's key no longer worked, I'd love to know where you are watching from. Please let me know in the comments below. And please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you believe that family should be built on respect, not on greed. The ride from Hartsfield-Jackson Airport was quiet. The Atlanta night was cold, clear, and the Christmas lights strung across the city blurred into streaks of color. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the cab's heater. 71 years old, and I still felt like a kid on Christmas morning. I loved surprising my wife Denise. I'd been in Asia for 3 weeks. This trip was different. It was the last one. I had finally decided to retire for real this time. After 40 years as a mechanical engineer, I was done. I wanted to tell her face to face, to see her eyes light up with all the plans we'd made. We were going to see the world not for my work, but for us. I paid the cab driver and stepped out onto the familiar cobblestone path of our Inman Park home. This house was our life. We'd bought it in the 70s when nobody wanted to live here. We'd poured our sweat and savings into it for 45 years. We'd raised our son Darius within these walls. But as I approached the door, something felt wrong. The house was too bright, and there was music playing. Not Denise's quiet jazz, but something loud modern. I thought maybe Darius and Tiffany brought the grandkids over. But then I remembered we didn't have any grandkids. Not yet. I still had my old key. I slid it into the lock, turned it slowly, and eased the door open. The hallway was dark, but the living room was lit up like a Christmas tree. And that's when I heard it. Not the music, but under it. Someone was crying. It was a muffled, heartbroken sob, the kind of cry that tries to stay silent. I moved quietly. I'm a big man, 6'3", but I learned long ago how to be quiet, how to observe. The sound was coming from the sliding glass door that led to the balcony. I peeked through the slit in the curtains, and my heart just broke in two. It was Denise, my wife. She was standing in the freezing December cold, wearing only her thin house robe. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, and she was shaking. Tears were streaming down her face as she stared blankly at the single string of Christmas lights Darius had put on the old oak tree in our yard. She looked small, defeated. I wanted to run to her, to wrap her in my arms and ask who had hurt her. But then I looked into the living room, and everything froze. My son Darius was sitting on my favorite leather armchair, my armchair. He was holding a heavy crystal tumbler filled with my best whiskey, the 25-year-old single malt I was saving for his birthday. He was laughing, a loud, happy laugh I hadn't heard in years. Sitting across from him were Tiffany, his wife, and her parents Robert and Barbara. They were all dressed up. Tiffany wore a sparkling white dress, her blonde hair perfect. She was holding a new designer handbag, the kind I knew cost thousands of dollars. Her father Robert was smoking one of my cigars, from my humidor. He was doing it in my house, while my wife was crying in the cold just 10 feet away. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stayed in the shadow of the hallway and listened. "I'm telling you, Robert," Tiffany said, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the music. "It's a done deal. Darius finally agrees with me. We have to be serious about this." Robert swirled his whiskey. He had that arrogant look I'd always hated. "He'd better. This house, the land it's on, this is prime Inman Park real estate. We're not talking about a small retirement fund. We're talking about generational wealth." "What about your mother?" Barbara, Tiffany's mom, asked Darius. Her voice was like ice. "She seemed resistant the last time we talked." Darius waved his hand dismissively. That laugh again. "Oh, Mom, don't worry about her. She'll do whatever I say. She always does. She's too weak to fight." My blood turned to ice. Weak Denise, the woman who had taught in Atlanta's toughest schools for 30 years, the woman who raised him while I traveled for work, the woman who held this family together. Tiffany chimed in. "She's just lonely and depressed, Darius. Honestly, a nursing home would be perfect for her. She can make friends her own age. We'll find a nice one." Exactly, Barbara agreed. We've already looked at a lovely facility, Sunrise Meadows. It's top-notch. We just need her to sign the power of attorney. Once we have that, we can sell the house. Darius can invest his half of the money with Robert, and everyone wins. His half. They were already splitting my money. Darius shifted in his chair. He looked, not guilty, but nervous. Are you sure she'll sign? She will, Tiffany said, with a chilling confidence I'd never heard from her before. She reached over and placed her hand on her stomach. I told her this morning. I told her I was pregnant. Darius looked confused. What, you told her? I told her I was pregnant, Tiffany repeated slowly as if talking to a child. And I told her if she wants to be part of her grandchild's life, she needs to stop being so selfish and help the family. She'll sign by New Year's. She's desperate for a grandchild. I felt the bile rise in my throat. A fake pregnancy. A threat. They were using an imaginary child to blackmail my wife who was still standing outside crying so hard her shoulders were shaking. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I had heard enough. I backed away out of the hallway, out of the front door. I didn't slam it. I closed it so softly the latch didn't even click. I got back in the cab that was still waiting at the curb. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. Everything all right, sir? You look like you've seen a ghost. No, I said, my voice hoarse, unrecognizable. Take me to the Four Seasons, the one in Midtown. As the cab pulled away, I watched my house. My former house. They thought I was a retired, clueless old man. They thought Denise was weak. They thought they had won. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Darius. I didn't call Denise. I called the number for my personal security manager. Mike, it's Malachi. I need a bonded locksmith at 788 Inman Park Drive at 6 a.m. sharp. Change every lock on the property. Digital deadbolts, everything, no exceptions. He didn't ask questions. Yes, Mr. King, it's done. Then I made a second call, a number I knew by heart. Marcus, it's Malachi King. I know it's late. Wake up. We have a serious problem. And I need you at my house tomorrow at 8 a.m. I left the Four Seasons before the sun was up. The locksmith was a professional, quick, and silent. He finished his work at 6:15 a.m. just as the first gray light of morning hit the Atlanta skyline. I paid him in cash and slipped back into my own home. It felt alien. The air was stale with the lingering smell of expensive cigar smoke and Tiffany's sharp perfume. I didn't turn on any lights. I walked into the dark living room, the scene of the crime, and I sat in my leather armchair, the one my son had been laughing in just hours before. And I waited. I waited for 45 minutes, listening to the silence of the house. I heard the old floorboards creak upstairs. I heard the toilet flush. At 7 a.m. on the dot, I heard her footsteps slow and heavy coming down the stairs. Denise walked into the kitchen, her back to me. She went straight to the coffee pot. Her hands were shaking so badly that she spilled the dark grounds all over the white counter. She didn't clean it up. She just leaned against the counter, her head bowed, her shoulders slumped. Malachi, she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. She turned around slowly. When she saw me sitting there in the shadows, she didn't scream. She just made a small broken sound, a gasp, as her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide with a terror I had never seen before. Malachi. Oh my God. She stumbled forward, one hand gripping the doorframe. When did you get home? Why are you sitting in the dark? You scared me to death. I got home last night, I said. My voice was calm, cold, and it didn't sound like my own. I scared you. That's interesting. Because I was scared too, Denise. I was scared when I found my wife crying on the balcony while my son celebrated selling my house. The color drained from her face. She didn't try to deny it. She didn't try to lie. The strength that had held her up on that balcony, the strength that had held her together for months, just crumbled. She collapsed onto the floor right there by the kitchen island and she wept. It wasn't the silent cry from last night. This was a storm, a gut-wrenching, soul-tearing sob that came from a place of deep, profound shame. I didn't know what to do, she choked out her words, broken by her cries. I'm so sorry, Malachi. I'm so sorry. I didn't move from my chair. I didn't go to her. I couldn't. Tell me everything, I said, from the beginning. And she did. It all came pouring out, a torrent of manipulation and fear that had been building for 6 months. It started right after Darius got that promotion at Robert's company. A promotion I now realized that was just part of the trap. It started with suggestions. Tiffany the snake would come over for dinner. "Oh, Denise," she'd say, "this house is just so big for 2 people. Aren't you worried about the stairs? Aren't you tired of all the upkeep?" Then Robert and Barbara got involved. They started talking about their own brilliant retirement. They used words like liquidating assets and smart investments. "Robert's company," Denise whispered, her voice trembling. "They said Robert's company was the future. Sterling innovations. And they said if we sold the house, just sold this one asset, Robert could flip the money. He promised to double it in a year. He said it would be enough to take care of us and set Darius and Tiffany up for life." I just stared at her. My wife, a retired teacher with a master's degree, falling for a cheap scam pitched by her own son. "I told them no," she insisted, crying harder. "For months I told them no. I told them this house was our home. It was where we raised Darius. It was where your memory is." "And Darius?" I asked. "Where was my son in all of this?" Denise's face crumpled. He agreed with them, Malachi. At first he was quiet, but for the last 2 months, he's been the one pushing the hardest. He said I was being selfish. He said I was hoarding wealth. He said we owed it to him for all the modest years he had to endure growing up. Modest. We gave that boy everything. Private school, a car when he turned 16. We paid for his entire college education at Emory. We paid the down payment on his first condo. And he called it modest. "They want to put us in a nursing home, Malachi," she said, her voice barely audible. "They call it assisted living, but it's a home. They showed me the brochure, Sunrise Meadows. Tiffany said it was perfect, that I could make new friends." The air in the room was thick with her shame. "And last night," I said, my voice like gravel. "Last night wasn't just talk, was it?" She shook her head, unable to look at me. "They gave me an ultimatum. They said they were tired of waiting. They wanted me to sign the listing agreement today before you got home." "And what was the threat?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Denise finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a pain that went beyond the betrayal. "The baby." "What baby?" "Tiffany," she sobbed. "She told me last night. She's pregnant. She said if I didn't sign the papers by New Year's, if I didn't stop being difficult, they would move away, and they would make sure I never, ever saw my grandchild." The lie, the final filthy lie, using an imaginary child as a weapon to steal from us. I stood up. The cold rage I felt in the cab last night had settled into something hard and heavy like steel. I looked at my wife, crumpled on the floor. I still loved her, but the woman I married, the strong partner I knew, had been beaten down and broken. "Get up, Denise," I said. "What?" she sniffled. "Get up. Go upstairs. Take a shower. Put on your best clothes. It's time to stop crying." As if on cue, at exactly 8 a.m., there was a loud, impatient banging on the front door. Not a knock, a banging. "Mom!" I heard Darius shout through the wood. "Open the door." "What the hell? My key won't work." Another voice. Tiffany's sharp and annoyed. "She probably locked the deadbolt. I told you she was getting paranoid." Denise looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. "What do we do, Malachi? What are we going to do?" I walked past her. I went to the front door. I looked through the peephole. All 4 of them were there. Darius, Tiffany, Robert, and Barbara, bundled in their expensive coats, looking annoyed and arrogant. Denise grabbed my arm. "Malachi, please don't." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Go get dressed," I said. "I'll handle this." I took a deep breath. I unlocked the new deadbolt. I pulled the heavy oak door open. They all stared at me. Their faces were a perfect, priceless picture of absolute shock. "Dad," Darius gasped. You're home early." I looked at the key still dangling from his hand, the key that was now useless. "Your key doesn't work," I said, my voice echoing in the cold morning air, "because this is no longer your house." The silence that followed my words was heavy, thick, and cold. Darius's mouth opened and closed, making no sound, like a fish pulled from water. Robert, the man who had been smoking my cigars hours before, turned a sickly shade of pale. Barbara clutched the expensive pearls at her neck, her eyes wide with disbelief. But it was Tiffany who recovered first. She was a fighter, I had to give her that. She instantly wiped the shock from her face and manufactured a bright, brittle smile. "Dad," she exclaimed, her voice sickeningly sweet, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Oh my goodness, you're home. What a wonderful, wonderful surprise. We were just so worried about Mom." I just stared at her. I didn't move. "Yes," she continued, stepping forward as if she meant to hug me. I held up a hand and she stopped awkwardly, her arms still half raised. "We came by to take you both out to a lovely Christmas breakfast. We have such a wonderful plan to discuss. You know, for the future, to make sure you're both safe and taken care of." "A plan," I repeated. My voice was flat. "The plan you were discussing last night around midnight. The one that involves selling my house and putting my wife in a nursing home." Tiffany's smile didn't just falter, it shattered. Darius winced as if he'd been struck. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her eyes darting nervously between me and her parents. "We were just talking about options." "Options," I said. "Like threatening Denise with a fake pregnancy if she didn't sign the papers." Darius flinched. Tiffany's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. "How dare you? How dare you listen in on a private—" She was about to continue, but a low rumble interrupted her. A car, a black Mercedes Maybach, the kind you don't see in Inman Park every day, pulled up silently to the curb behind them. It was long, sleek, and screamed a level of wealth that Robert and Barbara only pretended to have. My wealth. The back door opened and a man stepped out. He was in his 50s, tall, sharp, and wore an impeccably tailored dark pinstriped suit. He carried an expensive leather briefcase. This was Marcus Bilal, my lawyer, my confidant, the man who had managed my real portfolio for the last 20 years. The four of them turned to look at this new arrival. They looked confused. This man, this car did not fit their narrative of the poor, retired, clueless old engineer. Bilal walked right past them, as if they were nothing more than garden gnomes stepping onto my porch. "Mr. King, Mrs. King," Bilal said, his voice deep and professional. He nodded respectfully to me, and then to Denise, who was now standing nervously behind me in the doorway wearing her nice blue dress. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. I have the initial documents you requested." He opened his briefcase, clicked a pen, and handed me a folder. "This is the updated deed for the foundation ready for your signature." Denise looked at me confused. "Foundation Malachi what?" I just patted her hand. "We'll talk about it later, dear. Business first." Then Bilal turned his full, undivided attention to the four people still standing on my walkway. He looked at them not as people, but as a mild inconvenience, an obstacle to be cleared. He pulled two thick, formal envelopes from his briefcase. "Are you Darius King?" he asked. Darius just nodded, his throat working, but no sound coming out. Bilal handed him the first envelope. "You have been served." "And you are Tiffany King." Tiffany flinched. "Yes. What is this? What is going on?" Bilal handed her the second envelope. "You have also been served." "Served?" Darius yelled, his voice finally returning. He tore his envelope open. "Served with what I don't understand." That, Bilal said, his voice cutting through the crisp morning air, "is a temporary restraining order filed by my clients, Mr. and Mrs. King. It legally prohibits you, your wife, and her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Robert—" He paused to look at them with disdain, "from contacting, harassing, or coming within 500 feet of this property." "What?" Tiffany shrieked, her voice cracking. "On what grounds? This is our family." "On the grounds," Bilal said, reading coolly from a document, "of elder harassment conspiracy to commit fraud and emotional extortion. My clients have documented evidence and recordings that you have engaged in a systematic campaign of intimidation to illegally seize their assets." Extortion. The word hung in the air. Robert and Barbara looked horrified, not because of the accusation, but because they had been publicly named. Tiffany, however, recovered faster than any of them. The fear on her face disappeared, replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. "This is ridiculous," she screamed, crumpling the legal papers in her fist. "This is insane. We are the victims here." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "He's the one threatening us. He's delusional. He's been in Asia for 3 weeks. He's probably got jet lag. He doesn't even know what he's saying." She turned to her parents and then back to us, her voice rising hysterically, a performance for the whole neighborhood to hear. We were trying to help them. We were trying to protect them from themselves. He's the one who's not well. She lunged forward, stopping just at the edge of the porch, her eyes blazing with a desperate, trapped anger. You want to talk about harassment? What about the harassment of two old people who can't take care of themselves anymore? She then turned her venom on Denise, who shrank back behind me. And look at her. Just look at her. She's been crying for 6 months. She's depressed. She's paranoid. She told me just last week she thought she heard someone in the house. She's losing her mind. Denise looked at me horrified. I thought I did. Tiffany smiled. It was a cruel, triumphant smile. She turned back to Bilal. You can't serve us, counselor. We are the only family they have. This isn't extortion. This is a family intervention. She took a step back, grabbed Darius's arm, and her voice became dangerously calm, more frightening than her yelling. In fact, thank you for this. You've just proved our point. You've proved that my father-in-law is erratic, paranoid, and a clear danger to himself and others. She looked past me into my house as if she already owned it. You think you're smart, Dad? You think you've won? We're not trying to steal your assets. We're trying to manage them. Because neither of you, she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me and then at my wife, are mentally competent to do it yourselves. Tiffany's accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Mentally competent. The words were a declaration of war. Before I could respond, Robert, her father, stepped forward. He physically moved in front of his daughter, placing a calming hand on her shoulder, as if to say, "Let the men handle this, dear." He straightened his already perfect suit jacket. He was the picture of suburban success, the kind of man who measures his worth by the car he drives and the golf club he belongs to. Malachi, he said, using my first name with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. Let's all just take a breath. My daughter is emotional. This is a stressful day for her. She clearly got off on the wrong foot. He was projecting an aura of calm, reasonable authority, the adult in the room. Look, he said, gesturing vaguely at the legal papers Bilal was holding. Let's put aside all this drama. This isn't about lawyers or restraining orders. This is about family. And more importantly, it's about common sense. I just stared at him. Bilal beside me was perfectly still. You've done a wonderful job with this house. Robert continued, his tone deeply patronizing. A real fixer-upper. And you've timed it perfectly. The market in Inman Park is white hot. This property, he gestured to my home, is sitting on a gold mine Malachi. He leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. But a gold mine is worthless if you just sit on it. It's dead money. It's just brick and wood. It's not working for you. You're 71. Denise is, 69? You two don't need all this space. You don't need the maintenance, the taxes, the stairs. What you need is security, liquidity. He smiled, proud of his financial buzzwords. That's all we were trying to say. We want to help you realize the value of this asset. We want to help you transition. Transition, I repeated. The word felt dirty. Exactly. Sell the house, take that money, and let me put it to work for you. Let me put it into sterling innovations. He saw the blank look on my face and chuckled. My company, we're on the cutting edge. New battery technology. It's the next Tesla Malachi, the next Apple. We're doing revolutionary things. I had to play my part, the part they had written for me, the confused, simple-minded old man. I let a look of curiosity cross my face. I tilted my head. Sterling innovations. That does sound familiar. I think I read something about that in the business section. Robert's chest puffed out. He was hooked. Of course you have. We're the talk of the financial world. We're in the middle of our Series C funding. The projections are, well, frankly, they're astronomical. I stroked my chin. Battery technology, you say? That's complex stuff. Is it stable? I mean, I'm just an old engineer, but that sounds risky. Robert laughed. A loud booming laugh that grated on my nerves. Risk. That's the difference, Malachi. You see risk, I see opportunity. You have to spend money to make money. We are talking about a patented lithium polymer breakthrough that will revolutionize everything. Electric cars, home energy, military applications. This isn't a risk, Malachi. It's a sure thing. Tell me more, I said, my voice filled with false admiration. It sounds very promising. How much are you projecting? Robert was in his element. He was the big shot explaining the world to the little old man. We're projecting a 500% return within 18 months, he said, pulling a number out of thin air. 500%. You give me the $500,000 from this house and I'll turn it into $2.5 million. Darius will be set for life. You and Denise will be set for life. Everyone wins. 500%, I repeated slowly. That's incredible. Truly. He nodded, smiling. It is. I paused. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. That's odd, I said. Robert's smile twitched. What's odd? Well, I said, it's just... I was looking at the Q4 financial reports for Sterling Innovations this morning on my flight home. The blood visibly drained from Robert's face. His smile vanished. Tiffany and Darius, who had been watching this exchange with growing confidence, suddenly tensed. What reports? Robert stammered. The reports filed with your creditors, I said. The numbers in those reports tell a very different story. They don't project a 500% gain. They project... Let me see if I remember this right. Oh yes, a $14 million operational deficit and an immediate intent to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy within the next 30 days. Robert looked like I had just punched him in the stomach. He was pale. He was shaking. That's slander, he sputtered. Those are private documents. How did you get those? Oh, I have them because they were sent to all major creditors, I said, which brings me to my next point. I turned to my lawyer, Mr. Bilal. What's the name of the fund that currently holds the largest unsecured debt position in Sterling Innovations? Bilal looked at his papers. That would be the Apex Technology Fund, Mr. King. They hold $22 million of his defaulted bonds. Robert looked like he was going to be sick right there on my walkway. Apex Technology Fund, I said, looking Robert dead in the eye. That's also risky. It's an investment I made 40 years ago when I sold a patent for a pressure valve system I designed. I let him connect the dots. I watched his mind race, the realization dawning in his terrified eyes. I leaned in close so only he, Tiffany, and Darius could hear me. I didn't just found Apex, Robert. I am Apex. I own the whole damn fund, which means as of this morning, I own you. Darius was the first to find his voice. It was a hoarse whisper, barely audible. Dad, what are you talking about? What is Apex you? You're an engineer. You're retired. He looked around, his eyes wide and desperate, searching for someone to confirm the reality he had known his entire life. He's confused, right, Tiffany? He's just jet-lagged. He's not making sense. Tiffany was silent. Her eyes, which had been blazing with arrogant fire just moments before, were now narrowed, calculating. She was staring at me, really seeing me for the first time. She was smart enough to know I wasn't bluffing. You're joking, Darius pleaded, his voice rising, cracking. This has to be a joke, right? A sick, cruel joke. You're not... You can't be. His voice trailed off. He looked at my face, searching for the simple, retired father he'd always known, the man he had dismissed, the man he planned to dispose of. He didn't find him. He found me. You're a mechanical engineer, he said one last time, his voice small, pathetic. You worked at the plant. We lived modestly. I said, my voice calm. I was a mechanical engineer, and I was a very good one. I looked past him, past the manicured lawn, to a time 40 years ago. When I was a young man at Georgia Tech, I designed something small, a pressure-actuated relief valve system for high-temperature fluid dynamics. It wasn't flashy. You wouldn't even know what it was if you looked at it, but it was revolutionary. I looked at Robert, who was now sweating visibly through his expensive shirt. It became the standard in offshore drilling, and then in chemical plants, and then in nuclear reactors. I turned back to my son. I sold that patent, Darius. I sold it in 1983 for what seemed like all the money in the world. But I didn't want that money to define me. I didn't want it to define you. I let that sink in. The only sound was a distant siren. I'd seen what unearned wealth does. I saw it destroy my own family, saw my uncle drink himself to death over an inheritance. I swore that would never happen to my son. So I took that money and I gave it to a friend from college, the smartest financial mind I ever knew. I told him to make it grow, but to keep it quiet. And that's what he did. His name is Marcus Bilal. Darius's eyes flickered to my lawyer, who stood impassive like a statue. He founded the Apex Technology Fund. And while I went to work at the plant every day for 40 years, while your mother taught school, while we lived in this house and clipped coupons, that fund grew. It grew from millions to tens of millions. And then, when the tech boom hit, it grew into 9 figures. 9 figures, Tiffany whispered. It was a choked sound, the sound of a dream dying. Yes, I lived modestly because I wanted you to learn the value of $1. I wanted you to learn how to work, how to sweat, how to build something of your own. I wanted you to be a man, Darius, not just a rich man's son. I looked at him, my heart aching with a sadness so deep it felt like a canyon. I failed. I gave you everything, the education, the down payment on your first condo, the opportunities, but I didn't teach you character. I protected you so much that I made you weak. I made you easy prey for people like this. I gestured toward Robert and Barbara. I wanted you to understand hard work. Instead, you just grew to resent me for it. You felt you were enduring a modest life while you were waiting for me to die so you could get this house. This house, which I assure you is barely a rounding error in my portfolio. My son had no answer. He just stared at the ground. So I turned my attention back to the real criminal. So, you see, Robert, I said, stepping closer to him. I don't just own your debt. I am the man you've been lying to for the last 3 quarters. Robert was trembling violently now. It was a bridge loan. The market shifted. I can explain. Shut up, I said, my voice dropping. Just shut up. You didn't just miss projections, Robert. You committed fraud. You submitted falsified reports to my fund. You claimed assets you don't have. You lied about your burn rate. That's not just bad business. That's a federal crime. I looked at my lawyer, who had been waiting patiently for his cue. Mr. Bilal, you are a witness to this conversation. You heard Mr. Robert's partner, his own daughter, admit to a conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. You've seen the financial reports I forwarded to you. Bilal nodded, his face grim. I have, Mr. King. Then I want you to make 2 calls. The first one is to the board of Apex. Tell them I am calling in the full $22 million loan, effective immediately. I want his company liquidated by the end of the fiscal year. And the second call, Bilal asked. The second call, I said, looking Robert dead in the eye, is to the district attorney. Tell them I have a file on Sterling Innovations that proves securities fraud. I want him prosecuted. That was when the screaming started. It wasn't Tiffany this time, it was Barbara. She let out a piercing shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. No, Robert. He can't tell him, he can't. She grabbed her husband's arm, but he was useless. He just stood there, his mouth slack, his eyes vacant. The man who had been the king of his country club 5 minutes ago was gone. Barbara's eyes rolled back in her head, and she crumpled onto the brick walkway in a dead faint. Mom! Tiffany screamed, rushing to her, but Robert didn't move. He just stared at me, his life in ruins. And Darius, my son, he was frozen. He hadn't moved an inch. He was trapped between the family he had betrayed and the family he had tried to join, watching both of them burn to the ground, all because of him. Chào bạn minh đẹp trai đàn ông da đen đây. Lỗi của tôi ban hoàn toàn chính xác. Tôi đã lơ đãng và lặp lại nội dung của phần 5 cho phần 6. Đây là một sai sót kỹ thuật của tôi đã không xử lý đúng yêu cầu mới của bạn cho phần 6 mà lại lặp lại kết quả của phần 5. Thành thật xin lỗi bạn. Chúng ta sẽ không để điều đó xảy ra lần nữa. Đây là phần 6 được viết lại chính xác theo dàn ý mới của bạn, bám sát các xung đột 22, 22, 23, 24, 25 và văn phòng đã thống nhất. Bat Dao Noi Dung Fan 6. Barbara's scream echoed on the walkway, but it was drowned out by a different, more desperate voice. Dad, stop. Please stop. I turned. My son Darius stumbled forward and fell to his knees on the grass right in front of me. He grabbed the fabric of my pants, his face twisted in a mask of pure terror. Dad, you can't, he sobbed. Please don't call the DA. Don't liquidate his company. You'll destroy them. You'll destroy Tiffany. You'll destroy me. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. This is my life, Dad. My family, you'll ruin everything. I'll lose my job. I'll have nothing. I looked down at my son, my 40-year-old son, kneeling on the lawn, begging me to protect the very people who had conspired to destroy his mother. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a cold, empty void. You'll have nothing, I said, my voice low and hard. You are worried about your job, about them. You stood in my living room last night, Darius, while your wife and her parents laughed about putting Denise in a nursing home. You heard them. You agreed with them. I crouched down slightly, forcing him to meet my gaze. Where were you when your mother was crying on that balcony? Where were you when she was so terrified of you all that she couldn't sleep? Where was this passion for your family then? You made your choice, son. You chose them. You chose their lies over your own blood. I didn't know, he pleaded. I didn't know about the money. I didn't know he was broke. You knew, a new voice shrieked. It was Tiffany. She had gotten to her feet, leaving her mother sobbing on the ground. Her face was pale, her expensive dress was dirty, and her eyes were filled with a venom so pure it was terrifying. She wasn't just beaten, she was cornered, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous. He's lying, she screamed at me. Darius knew. He knew everything. Tiffany, shut up, Darius yelled, scrambling to his feet. No, she screamed at him. I won't shut up. I'm not going down for this alone. It was my idea. She pointed a trembling finger at me. He was the one who was always complaining. He was the one who was ashamed of you. He was the one who couldn't stand it. I just watched. The whole rotten structure was collapsing in on itself. He was the one, she continued, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch, who told me my dad is just a stubborn old man sitting on a fortune and he's too stupid to use it. He was the one who was embarrassed to bring me here. He was the one who hated, living in that tiny condo while his father acted like a poor retired old fool. She turned to me, tears of pure rage streaming down her face. You selfish old man. You had 9 figures. You had all that and you let me marry him. She pointed at Darius. You let me marry a failure. You let me think this house was the grand prize. I wouldn't have even looked at him if I knew he was just a what, Tiffany? Darius whispered, his face ashen. A disappointment, she shrieked. A weak, pathetic man who couldn't even stand up to his own parents. I told him to be tough. I told him to take what was ours. I told him his mother was weak and would sign anything if he just pushed her. I had to marry him, just to have a chance at a better life, just to get this house. The admission was so raw, so nakedly greedy that even Bilal took a half step back. Darius just stared at her. The sound of the approaching sirens was getting closer, but he didn't seem to hear them. He looked at his wife, the woman he had chosen over his own mother, as if he was seeing her for the very first time. What? He whispered. You married me, just for this house, just for what you thought my father had. Darius's horrified whisper hung in the air. You married me, just for this house. Tiffany looked at him, and for the first time her mask of sophistication was completely gone. Her face was raw, ugly, and filled with a desperation that was terrifying. Yes! She screamed, the word ripping from her throat. For this house, for this land, for this neighborhood? What else did you think it was for you? She shoved him away. You think I wanted you with your sad little job and your boring stories. I endured you. I endured your boring mother with her cheap clothes and her sad, empty eyes. I endured years of this modesty, this pretending to be poor, all because my parents said to be patient. He's old Tiffany, they said. He can't live forever. Secure the asset. Just get the house. Her eyes, wild and bloodshot, found mine. You think I wanted to spend my holidays in this dusty, sad house, listening to your wife talk about the good old days? I deserved better. We deserved better. My parents, they sacrificed everything for me and you. You sat on this gold mine, and you let us struggle. She pointed a shaking finger at Darius. He was just the key, the weak, pathetic key to the lock. And I was so close, I was this close to having it all. And you ruined it. Her voice cracked and she was sobbing, but it was a wail of rage, not of sadness. I don't care about Robert's stupid company. I don't care about your imaginary fund. I want this house. This is my payment. This is what I am owed for wasting the best years of my life on your pathetic son. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I didn't even move from the porch. I just laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was a cold, dry, joyless sound that cut right through her screaming. It stopped her. It stopped everyone. The first police siren was getting closer now, but in that moment, the only sound was my laughter echoing in the cold morning air. Tiffany stared at me, her chest heaving, her beautiful hair a tangled mess. What? What's so funny, old man? I wiped a single cold tear from the corner of my eye. You, I said. You are what's funny. All of this. All your scheming. All your lies. All your wasted youth, as you put it. I gestured to the beautiful two-story brick home behind me. All for this. I took a step toward her. Tiffany, after everything I just told you, after I explained that I own a 9-figure investment fund, you still think this house, this plot of land in Inman Park, you still think this is my greatest asset? I shook my head slowly. You truly are a fool. Her face contorted. What do you mean it's worth millions? The land alone? It's a rounding error, Tiffany. I didn't answer her. I just turned my head slightly to my lawyer, who had been watching this entire exchange with the quiet patience of a hunter. Mr. Bilal, I said, my voice calm again, I believe you have File B for them. Bilal nodded once. He reached back into his immaculate leather briefcase, past the restraining orders, past the fraud reports, and pulled out a simple, slim manila folder. He didn't hand it to them. He opened it himself. File B, Bilal announced, his voice projecting clearly for everyone on the lawn to hear. This is a copy of a fully executed and recorded quitclaim deed. It is dated June 12th of this year, 6 months ago. He held up the front page. As of that date, Bilal continued, Mr. Malachi King and Mrs. Denise King legally and irrevocably transferred their full unencumbered ownership of the property located at 788 Inman Park Drive. Darius looked up, his face a mask of confusion, a desperate, pathetic hope dawning in his eyes. Transferred to who? To me? Dad, is it in my name? Tiffany's eyes were glued to the paper, searching, scanning for a loophole. Who? She hissed. No, Mr. King, Bilal said, his voice void of all emotion. Not to you. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on them. The property was transferred in its entirety to a non-profit charitable entity. This house, it no longer belongs to your family. It hasn't for half a year. The sound Tiffany made was not human. It was a strangled, agonizing wail that came from the depths of her soul. No, he's lying. That's illegal. You can't. We'll fight it. We'll contest it. You can't just give away our inheritance. Robert, who had been frozen in place, finally found his voice. It was a hoarse whisper. Who did you sell it to? I looked at him, this man who had tried to build his failing empire on the ruins of my family. I looked at Tiffany, who was now clinging to Darius, sobbing hysterically. I looked at my son, who just looked empty. And finally, I looked at my wife, Denise. She was staring at me, her eyes wide, but the fear was gone. It was replaced by a look of stunned, dawning understanding. And for the first time in 6 months, I saw a flicker of her old strength return. I didn't sell it, Robert, I said as the first police car, its blue and red lights flashing, turned the corner onto our street. I told you, I gave it away. To who? Tiffany shrieked. I donated it, I said. This house, this land, and every single thing inside it now belongs to the Denise King Foundation for victims of domestic and emotional abuse. I looked at my wife. I named it after your mother, Darius, the woman you all tried to destroy. The flash of the police lights on Robert's face was the only thing that broke the stunned silence. 2 uniformed officers stepped onto the grass, walking past Tiffany, and moved directly to her father. Bilal, ever the professional, did not miss a beat. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension loud enough for the officers and the rapidly gathering neighbors to hear. "And furthermore, Mrs. King," he said, addressing Tiffany, who was still hyperventilating, "your very public admissions just now admitting to a multi-month conspiracy to defraud your mother-in-law and a plan to have her declared mentally incompetent for financial gain have been noted." What admissions?" she gasped, her eyes darting to the police. "Your voluntary confession," Bilal stated, "witnessed by all parties present solidifies our case." He looked at me. "Mr. King, based on these admissions, our case for emotional distress is no longer just a threat, it is a certainty." He then turned back to Tiffany and Darius, who looked as if he had been turned to stone. "On behalf of Mrs. Denise King," Bilal announced, "we will be filing a civil suit this afternoon seeking $5 million in damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder harassment. We will be filing an injunction to freeze any and all known assets of Mr. and Mrs. Darius King pending the outcome of that suit." $5 million. The number was a physical blow. Tiffany staggered back, her hand flying to her chest. "You can't," she whispered. We don't have... That's impossible." "That's the point, isn't it?" I said quietly. "You don't have it." The first officer had reached Robert, who was still trying to process the words Apex Fund. "Sir," the officer said, placing a firm hand on Robert's arm. Robert flinched violently. "Mr. Robert Sterling." "Yes. What is this?" Robert stammered, attempting to pull his arm away, trying to regain his mask of authority. "You are under arrest," the officer said flatly, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Arrest?" It was Barbara who screamed. She had managed to sit up on the walkway and was now scrambling to her feet. "Arrest him for what?" "On suspicion of securities fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement from the Sterling Innovations Pension Fund," the second officer stated calmly. "We received an anonymous tip, which was immediately corroborated by a full file from the district attorney's office. That file was forwarded by the Apex Technology Fund." Bilal. He hadn't just made the call. He had sent the entire case file. He was a shark. "No!" Barbara shrieked, clawing at the officer's arm as he cuffed her husband. "You can't take him. It's his fault." She pointed a trembling manicured finger at me. "He did this. He trapped us. He trapped. He's the criminal." The officers ignored her, clicking the cuffs shut on Robert. They moved to Barbara. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us as well. You're listed as a co-signer on the fraudulent loans." No, Robert, do something!" Barbara wailed as they cuffed her. As the officers led them to the car, their words dissolving into the, "You have the right to remain silent." Tiffany just watched. The foundation of her entire world, her parents, their illusion of money, their social status, was being marched away in handcuffs. She had nothing. She had lost the house. She had lost the inheritance. And she had just lost her parents. She turned slowly. Her eyes, no longer shocked, were now filled with a cold, pure reptilian hatred. She looked at Darius. "You," she whispered. "Tiffany," Darius began, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of peace. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he had..." "You knew," she hissed. "You didn't know he was rich, but you knew he was stubborn. You knew he was strong. You told me your mother was weak. You told me she would break. You lied to me." I didn't lie. I thought..." "You thought nothing," she screamed, lunging at him, her hands balled into fists. "You are weak. You've always been weak. You couldn't even stand up to your own mother. You couldn't secure our future. You let this happen." "My future," Darius yelled back, the injustice and confusion finally boiling over. "My mother. You mean the woman you threatened, the woman you called weak. She is weak, and so are you." The sound of the slap was sharp and ugly, cracking across the quiet morning street. Tiffany's hand struck Darius's face with so much force his head snapped to the side. The neighbors who were still watching gasped. Darius slowly brought a hand to his bright red cheek. He just stared at her. "You coward," she spat, her chest heaving. "You lost everything. You lost the house. You lost the money. You lost me. You are a coward. Darius King, you are nothing. You are just like them." She gestured at me and Denise with pure contempt. "Nothing but a pathetic, weak failure." Darius didn't say a word. He just stood there, his cheek blazing red, his eyes completely empty. He had just watched his entire world detonate. His wife despised him, his parents-in-law were in handcuffs, and his mother and I, we were strangers he had tried to rob. I had seen enough. The battle was over, the victory was total, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. I looked at my son, my only child. He was broken, utterly and completely broken, and he had done it all to himself. I turned to Denise, who was standing beside me, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with a deep, bottomless sadness, but she was no longer crying. She was standing tall. "It's over, Denise," I said to her. "It's done." I looked at Darius one last time. He was still standing frozen on the lawn as Tiffany continued to scream at him, blaming him, cursing him her life in ruins. "You made your choice, Darius," I said. My voice wasn't angry anymore, it was just tired. "You chose them. You chose their money. You chose their greed over your mother's love." I paused, letting the finality of it settle on him. "And now, you have neither. You have nothing." I put my arm around Denise's shoulders. She leaned into me. "Bilal," I said over my shoulder, "we're going inside. Please handle the cleanup." "Of course, Mr. King," he replied. Denise and I turned our backs on the screaming, on the flashing police lights, on the staring neighbors, and on our son. We walked slowly side by side back into the house that was no longer ours, but was now for the first time a sanctuary. As we crossed the threshold, I heard Bilal's voice one last time, firm and final, directed at the chaos on the lawn. "You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises before you are arrested for trespassing." Then he stepped inside and the heavy oak door swung shut, closing them out of our lives for good. The heavy oak door clicked shut, plunging the living room into a sudden, muffled silence. The sound of the police sirens, Tiffany's shrieking, and Darius's desperate pleas were cut off instantly. We were alone. For the first time in 48 hours, I was alone with my wife, Denise. Mr. Bilal, ever discreet, had already let himself out the back entrance. It was just us standing in the room that was now the headquarters of a multi-million-dollar foundation. The furniture was the same, but it felt hollow. This wasn't our home anymore. It was an office, a monument to a life that had just ended. Denise didn't move. She didn't hug me. She didn't say, "Thank you for saving me, Malachi." She just stood there, her back straight, her hands clasped in front of her. The fear and sadness I had seen in her eyes that morning were gone, replaced by something else. A cold, hard clarity I hadn't seen in decades. She turned to face me. "Why?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Why what, Denise?" I said, loosening my tie. "I handled it. It's over." "Why?" she said again, her voice low and trembling, not with fear but with a new rising anger. "Did you lie to me for 45 years? 45 years, Malachi. I am your wife." I sighed. I had been waiting for this. "I didn't lie to you. I didn't tell you. I did it to protect you. I did it to protect Darius." "Protect me?" She let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded alien coming from her. "Protect me from what? From having a comfortable life, from not having to budget every single dollar. You didn't protect me, Malachi. You let me be humiliated." She advanced on me, her eyes blazing. "Last night, I was standing on that balcony. I was crying, Malachi, crying because I was terrified of losing our home. A home you had already given away without even telling me. Denise, you let me feel poor," she said, her voice rising. "You let me feel helpless. You let me save coupons and worry about the power bill. You let me be looked down on by that woman and her arrogant parents. You sat there and watched them treat me like a foolish, senile old woman who didn't matter. And you knew the whole time that you could buy and sell them 1,000 times over. You didn't protect me. You used me. You used me as part of your costume of a simple life." The accusation hit me harder than Tiffany's slap hit Darius, because it was true. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I've been married to a stranger, a man who didn't trust me, a man who didn't trust his own wife with the truth." "You want to know why?" I said, my own voice rising. "You want to know what this money does? You think it's a blessing? It's a curse. It's a poison." I walked to the fireplace, gripping the mantle. "I've never told you this. I never told anyone." I looked at her. "You know I had an uncle, my father's brother Leon. You met him once a long time ago, at our wedding." "I remember," she said. "He seemed flashy and sad." "He was," I said. My grandfather struck oil in Texas in the 40s. He left his 2 sons a fortune. My father was smart. He took his half, invested it, and never touched it. He lived a simple life. He became an engineer just like me. But Leon was different. He loved the money. He loved the cars, the parties, the friends who were always around. I took a deep breath, the memory still burning after 50 years. He burned through it all. He chased bad investments men exactly like Robert Sterling, who promised him the world. And when the money was gone, his friends were gone. I was 22 years old, Denise. I had just graduated from Georgia Tech. I drove to his mansion in Buckhead because he wasn't answering the phone. The bank was foreclosing. The house was empty. All the expensive furniture had been repossessed. "I found him," I whispered. I found him in his empty study. He had put a shotgun in his mouth. He left a note. It said, "I am nothing without the money." He chose death over a life without wealth. Denise's hand went to her mouth. "Oh, Malachi, I never knew." "I swore that day," I said, my voice thick with the memory. "I swore on his grave that I would never let that happen to my family. I would never let money be the center of our lives. When I sold that patent, I had a choice. I could have become Leon, or I could be my father. So I hid it. I hid it all. I wanted Darius to grow up strong. I wanted him to learn the dignity of work. I wanted him to become a man who was defined by his character, not by his bank account. I didn't want him to be weak. I didn't want him to be like Leon." There was a long silence. Denise just stared at me, processing the weight of the secret I had carried for our entire marriage. Finally, she shook her head slowly. The anger was gone, replaced by a devastating, weary sadness. "And look what happened, Malachi," she said softly. I looked at her confused. "Look at what happened," she repeated, her voice stronger. "You protected him so much that you broke him. Your silence didn't make Darius strong. It made him weak. It made him ashamed of us. He thought we were simple. He thought we were poor. You were so busy protecting him from your past, from becoming Leon, that you made him the perfect, easy target for Tiffany and Robert. You didn't protect our family, Malachi. You just built a different kind of prison." Before I could answer her, before I could even process the terrible truth of her words, my phone rang. It was a blocked number. I hesitated, then answered it. "Hello? Dad?" The voice was broken, choked with sobs. It was Darius. Dad, please. Please don't hang up. She's gone. Tiffany, she took the car. She said I was a failure. She said she never loved me. My job called. Robert's entire board is being arrested. I'm fired. I'm ruined, Dad." His voice was a pathetic wail. "I have nothing. I'm at a payphone on the highway. I don't have any money. Please, Dad. I'm your son. Please help me." I listened to the desperate, broken pleading of my only child. I looked at Denise. She was watching me, her face pale, her eyes hard as stone, waiting to see what I would do, waiting to see if I would fall back into the trap of protecting him. I pressed the end call button on the side of my phone. Click. The line went dead. Denise closed her eyes for a brief second. "Who was that?" she asked. I tossed the phone onto the armchair I had been sitting in. "No one," I said. "Just a wrong number." It was 3 days later. 3 days of an agonizing, heavy silence in the house. Denise and I moved around each other like ghosts, 2 strangers occupying the same space. The house was now officially the Foundation's headquarters, and a small, discreet staff had already begun setting up an office in the old study. We were living upstairs like guests in our own memories. The phone calls from Darius had stopped. The silence from him was louder and more terrifying than his pleading. I was in the kitchen staring at a coffee cup when I heard a commotion at the front door. Not a banging this time, but a desperate, frantic sobbing. Please, I just need to see him. Let me go." I recognized the voice. It was Tiffany. I walked to the foyer. Mike, the new security manager Bilal had hired for the Foundation, was standing in the open doorway blocking her path. But this was not the Tiffany I had last seen. The woman screaming on my lawn, her face contorted with rage, was gone. The woman in her place was a wreck. Her expensive blonde hair was matted and greasy. She wore sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face puffy from days of crying. "Mr. King," Mike said, not turning, "this woman is demanding to see you. She is not on the approved list." "Let her in, Mike," I said. Mike looked surprised but stepped aside. Tiffany stumbled into the foyer and just collapsed. She fell to her knees on the marble floor, her hands clasped in front of her as if in prayer. She didn't look at me. She just sobbed, her entire body shaking. "Mr. King, Malachi, please." She wept, her words barely coherent. "Please, you have to help me. I have nowhere else to go. My parents, they're in jail. Their assets are frozen. I'm going to be evicted. I have nothing. Nothing." I stood there saying nothing. Denise had come out of the kitchen and was watching from the doorway, her face pale. "I know I don't deserve it," Tiffany choked out. "I know I was horrible. I was a monster, I know that. But it's not about me, it's not." She looked up, her face a mess of tears and desperation. She slowly, deliberately placed a hand on her stomach. "It's about your grandchild." Denise let out a small, sharp gasp. I lied before," Tiffany said, her voice frantic. "I wasn't pregnant then. I was just saying it to pressure your wife. But I am now. I'm 6 weeks pregnant. I found out 2 days ago." She fumbled in her pocket, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper, a positive test from a clinic. "It's Darius's baby, I swear it. I swear it on my life. It's his. It's your grandchild." She crawled forward, grabbing the hem of my pants. "You can't let your own grandchild be born on the streets. Please, Malachi, you're a rich man. You can set up a trust. You can help us. For the baby. Not for me, for the baby." I looked down at her. The imaginary grandchild had been a weapon, and now the real grandchild was a shield. This was a new, more desperate and more disgusting level of manipulation. Denise stepped forward, her hands shaking. "Is it true, Tiffany? Is it really his?" Yes, I swear it," she cried. "I would advise against making any financial commitments based on that statement, Mr. King." The voice came from the study. Marcus Bilal walked out carrying his briefcase. He must have arrived for our 10 o'clock meeting. Tiffany's head snapped toward him. This is none of your business. This is a family matter." "It is in fact my business," Bilal said smoothly, stepping between me and Tiffany. "As you are currently being sued by my client's foundation for $5 million, and your family claim," he looked down at her stomach, "is as usual factually incorrect." "What do you mean?" Tiffany hissed, trying to get to her feet. "It's his baby, I can prove it." "That won't be necessary," Bilal said. He opened his briefcase. "As you know, Ms. Tiffany, as part of the standard discovery process for your ongoing divorce from Darius King, your lawyer filed several petitions." Bilal pulled out a single sheet of paper. "In a desperate attempt to establish a claim on the King family assets, your lawyer filed a petition for spousal support and preemptive child support, a common legal tactic. To support that claim, he submitted a preemptive paternity test which you took last week, hoping to prove the child was Darius's and secure funds." He held up the paper. "We received a copy of that report from the court this morning. Ms. Tiffany, according to this legally binding DNA test, the one you commissioned, the probability of Darius King being the father of your child is 0%. Tiffany just stared at the paper. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. She wasn't just crying anymore, she wasn't breathing. "No," she whispered. "No, that's impossible. It's a lie. You forged it." "We did not," Bilal said, his voice like ice. "It was submitted by your own legal team. But we did take the liberty of running our own investigation. Our investigator, cross-referencing the phone and text records we obtained during the fraud discovery, has already identified the actual father." Bilal looked at his notes. "His name is Mr. Harrison, correct? Your former boss at Sterling Innovations. The one you were having an affair with for the last 8 months." He paused, letting the words land. "The same Mr. Harrison, I should add, who was arrested by federal agents yesterday morning. He was arrested for his direct involvement in your father's, Robert Sterling's, pension fund embezzlement scheme." Bilal looked at her, his eyes cold. "You weren't just lying to your husband about the baby, Ms. Tiffany. You were actively conspiring with your father's partners in crime. This house, it was just a small part of your plan, wasn't it? You were playing every side." Tiffany didn't scream this time. She didn't faint. She just crumpled. She sat down hard on the marble floor, her face completely, utterly empty. All the fight, all the venom, all the schemes. They were gone. She was a shell. The pregnancy wasn't a lie, but the father was. She had been caught in a trap of her own, making a web of deceit so tangled that she herself was now at the center with no escape. She looked at me, her eyes hollow. "Help me," she whispered. "Please." I looked at her. The woman who had tried to destroy my wife. The woman who had married my son as a business transaction. The woman who had conspired with criminals. I turned to my security manager. "Mike, Ms. Tiffany is trespassing. Please escort her off the property." Mike nodded. He stepped forward and gently but firmly helped her to her feet. "Ma'am, you need to leave." She didn't fight. She didn't say another word. She just let him lead her out the front door, a ghost being evicted from a house she had never not for 1 second belonged in. I walked to the living room window. Denise was already there watching. We watched as Mike led Tiffany down the walkway to the street. She stood there on the curb for a long moment alone, then turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner. Denise placed a hand on the cold glass. She wasn't triumphant. She just looked immeasurably sad. "She's lost Malachi," she whispered. "She has absolutely nothing left." "She has the consequences of her choices, Denise," I said. "And so do we." Denise's sadness was a physical presence in the house. After Tiffany was escorted away, a new, heavier silence fell. The frantic, desperate energy was gone, replaced by a vacuum. The phone calls from Darius, the ones filled with pleading and self-pity, had stopped. They had stopped completely. At first, I felt a grim satisfaction. He had finally gotten the message. But after 2 days, the silence began to feel different. It felt unnatural, final. Denise started pacing. She would walk from the kitchen window to the living room window, staring out at the street. "He hasn't called Malachi," she said on the third morning. Her voice was thin. "Good," I said, my voice hard. "He has nothing to say." "No," she said, turning to face me. The sadness in her eyes was now mixed with a sharp new terror. "You don't understand him. He's not like you. He's not strong. He's impulsive. He's like—" She stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. I knew what she was going to say. "He was like my Uncle Leon, the man who saw death as the only escape from shame." "He just lost everything, Malachi," she whispered. "His wife, his job, his home, his parents-in-law, the child he thought was his. He just found out his entire life was a lie. What if he does something permanent?" The accusation hit me. She was right to be afraid. My son was weak. I had seen it. I had fostered it. His weakness was what made him a target for Tiffany in the first place, and now that weakness could make him a danger to himself. "He's just hiding Denise," I said, but the words felt hollow. "He's embarrassed. He'll show up when he's hungry." But a week passed. Then 10 days. The police had already arrested Robert and Barbara. The Sterling Innovations fraud was front-page news. Tiffany had vanished, probably to live with whatever friends she had left. But Darius, my son, had disappeared from the face of the earth. Denise was a wreck. She wasn't eating. She just sat in the study, her foundation's office, now staring at the phone, waiting for a call from the police or the morgue. On the 12th day, I couldn't take her pain anymore. My anger at Darius was still a hot coal in my chest, but my love for my wife was stronger. I went into the study. "I'll find him." She looked up, her eyes desperate. "You will—" "I won't talk to him," I said, making my own boundaries clear. "I won't promise him anything, but I will find out where he is. I will make sure he is alive." I called Marcus Bilal. "I need your investigator, Marcus, the good one. Find my son. I don't want him contacted. I just want a location. Proof of life." The search began, and the reports that trickled in painted a grim, terrifying picture of my son's descent. Bilal's investigator was thorough. The first report came 2 days later. "Mr. King, Darius King's credit cards are maxed out and have been declined. His bank account is empty. His condo has been foreclosed on by the bank. His car was repossessed 3 days ago." I read the report to Denise. She just cried. The next report came 3 days after that. "We have a potential sighting. A man matching his description was seen at a day labor call center in Forest Park. He used his social security number to register for work. By the time my operative arrived, he had already collected his pay for the day, $50 in cash, and left. The trail is cold, but we know he is on foot and operating in cash." $50. My son, the man who wore tailored suits and drank my best whiskey, working for $50 a day. "He's working Malachi," Denise said, clutching that small piece of hope. He's working. That's good, right? It's something, I said. The search moved to the shadows. The investigator started checking the places where desperate men go. The cheap weekly rate motels, the shelters, the soup kitchens. The next file Bilal sent me was filled with photographs. They were grainy, nighttime photos of bleak, desperate places. The Atlanta Mission, a line of men waiting outside a church for a meal. A flop house on the south side where rooms were rented by the hour. Is he in one of those? I asked Bilal on the phone. Not yet, Bilal said. But this is the circle he's in. He's running out of options fast, Malachi. He has no car, no credit, no home. He is officially off the grid. For the first time, my anger was eclipsed by a cold, sharp fear. My Uncle Leon's face flashed in my mind. The empty house, the note. I am nothing without the money. Had I done this? Had my decision to hide my wealth to protect him ultimately been the thing that destroyed him? Then, after nearly a month of searching, the call came. I found him, the investigator said. His voice was flat. He's not homeless. He has a job, and he has a room. You won't like it. Where? A warehouse complex near the old rail yards in East Point. He's working a non-union crew, loading trucks. They pay cash at the end of the shift. He's renting a room by the week at the Starlight Motel across the street. It's the Starlight. I knew that place. It was a place you went when you had no other place to go. Thank you, I said. Send me the address and send me the bill. I didn't tell Denise. I just took my car, my simple 10-year-old sedan, and I drove. I drove past the glass towers of Midtown, past the manicured lawns of Inman Park, and into the industrial heart of the city, where the pavement was cracked and the buildings were rust. I found the warehouse. It was a massive corrugated tin structure loud with the sound of trucks and machinery. I parked across the street near the motel. The Starlight sign was missing the S. It just read Tarlight. I sat there for 2 hours. I just watched. At 5 p.m., a loud bell rang. The massive bay doors of the warehouse rolled open and a stream of men poured out. They were covered in grime, soot, and sweat. I scanned their faces, my heart pounding. I didn't see him. My God, I thought, did he leave? Did I miss him? And then I saw him. I almost didn't recognize him. The son I knew was gone. The man who walked out of that warehouse was a stranger. He had lost maybe 30-40 pounds. His face was gaunt, his beard matted and dirty. His clothes, a pair of old jeans and a torn t-shirt, hung off his frame. His shoulders weren't slumped with shame. They were slumped with a bone-deep physical exhaustion that I had never seen in him. I watched, frozen, as he walked over to a man with a clipboard and a metal cash box. The man checked his name, counted out some bills, and handed them to Darius. My son took the cash. He didn't even look at it. He just folded it and put it in his pocket. He didn't go to the motel. He walked past my car, his eyes fixed on the ground, and went into the small, dirty convenience store on the corner. I waited. 5 minutes later, he came out. In his hand, he held a loaf of cheap white bread and a small jar of peanut butter. His dinner. He started walking back toward the motel. He was almost past my car when he stopped. He must have caught his own reflection in the tinted glass. He paused, looking at the broken man in the window. Slowly, he turned his head. He saw me. He didn't run. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He just stood there on the dirty sidewalk holding his loaf of bread. The exhaustion in his eyes was so profound it looked like a permanent stain on his soul. I opened my door and got out of the car. We stood there 10 feet apart. The only sound was a distant train whistle. He looked at me, then at the bread in his hands. He swallowed his throat dry. "Hello, Dad," he said. His voice was a rasp. I couldn't find the anger. It was gone. All I had was this hollow, aching space in my chest. "What are you doing here, Darius?" He looked at the warehouse, then at the cash in his other hand. "Paying the price." I drove away from the warehouse in a daze. The image of my son was burned into my mind. Not the man in the suit I'd seen on my porch, but this broken shell. Gaunt, filthy, clutching a loaf of bread like it was treasure. I had gone there expecting to feel anger. I had gone there expecting to feel a cold, hard satisfaction that justice was being served. But I didn't. I just felt hollow. He hadn't asked for money. He hadn't begged for forgiveness. He hadn't even made an excuse. He had just looked at me with those dead, empty eyes and said 2 words, "Paying the price." I drove back to my suite at the Four Seasons, the words echoing in my head. What price? The price for betraying his mother. The price for choosing greed. It seemed too simple. The man I saw was being crushed by something more than just shame. He was being hunted. I sat in the silence of my hotel room, the Atlanta skyline glittering below, and I wondered for the first time if I had missed something, if there was another layer to this rotten onion that I hadn't yet peeled back. My phone rang. It was Marcus Bilal. His voice was all business, but I could hear an urgency under it. "Malachi," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "I'm glad I caught you. We found it." "Found what, Marcus?" I was tired. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. "I just saw Darius. I'm not sure I can take any more tonight." There was a pause. "You're going to want to take this call," Bilal said. "We found the why, the real why." I sat up straight. "Go on." "Robert Sterling. We knew he was bankrupt. We knew his company was a house of cards. But we didn't understand the level of desperation. My forensic accountants have been locked in a room with the Sterling Innovations books for 72 hours. They just finished their preliminary report. And it's not just bad investments, Malachi. It's criminal. The man didn't just lose money. He stole it." I gripped the phone tighter. "From who? His investors?" "Worse." Bilal said, his voice grim. "From his own employees. For the last 3 years, Robert Sterling has been systematically embezzling from his company's 401k pension fund. A little at first just to cover a bad month, he probably told himself. But the hole got bigger. The market dipped. His investments failed. And he kept digging." "How bad is it?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "The hole in that pension fund," Bilal said, "is currently $2.2 million. Money that belongs to the 65 people who work for him. Their retirement, their life savings, gone." I felt sick. "And he thought selling my house. He was going to use my money to plug that hole." "It was his only lifeline," Bilal confirmed. A federal audit was scheduled for February 1st. He had until then to replace the $2.2 million, or he was going to prison for a very, very long time. Selling your house wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme for him, Malachi. It was the only thing standing between him and a federal penitentiary. I was silent, processing the sheer cold audacity of the crime, using my money to cover up his own. But Darius," I said, my mind still reeling from the image of my son at the warehouse. "He didn't know that. He just thought they were making an investment. He was weak, but he's not that." The silence on the other end of the line was heavier this time. It was longer. "Malachi," Bilal said, and I could hear the weariness in his voice. "That's the other thing. That's the part we've been trying to piece together. We have to talk about Darius." "What about him?" "He knew." The words hit me. What he knew. He knew Robert was stealing from his employees. "He did," Bilal said. "He not only knew, Malachi, he was the one who found it. About 8 months ago. Darius, for all his weakness, isn't stupid with numbers. He's an accountant. He saw the discrepancies in the partnership reports Robert was trying to get him to sign off on. He did his own digging, and he found the $2 million hole." A strange, bitter flash of pride shot through me. So he was going to expose him. Is that what this was about?" "It appears that was his intention," Bilal said. "At first, we pulled the security logs from the Sterling Innovations offices. We have video footage of a late-night meeting between Darius and Robert 8 months ago. It's intense. Darius confronts him. Robert denies it. Then Darius throws a file on the table. The proof." "So what happened?" I demanded. "Why didn't he go to the police right then?" "Because Robert had a file of his own, on Darius." I froze. "What are you talking about?" Bilal sighed. "Malachi, it appears your son, he wasn't just weak, he was compromised. For the last year, Darius has been having an affair. An affair, we knew that, with Tiffany's boss. The baby." "No," Bilal interrupted gently. "Not that one. Another one. A different one. This was before Tiffany's affair. A colleague at his own company. A junior analyst." I was completely lost. "I don't understand." "It seems your son was leading a very expensive double life," Bilal explained, his voice all business. "He was taking this other woman on trips, buying her expensive gifts. He even co-signed the lease on her apartment in Midtown. And he wasn't using his own money, Malachi. His salary, as you know, was modest." "Don't tell me," I whispered, sinking into the hotel chair. He was using the company credit card, Bilal said, falsifying expense reports. Petty theft, but it added up, nearly $60,000 over 9 months. Robert discovered it the same week Darius discovered the pension fund embezzlement. The final rotten piece of the puzzle slotted into place. It was a standoff, Bilal said, mutually assured destruction. So they blackmailed each other. I said the words tasting like acid. Precisely. Robert told Darius, "You expose my $2 million felony and I'll expose your $60,000 felony and the affair. You'll go to prison, you'll lose your wife, and you'll be disgraced." So they made a deal. The deal, I said, was my house. It was the only solution, Bilal confirmed. Robert desperately needed the money from the sale to cover his embezzlement before the auditors arrived. Darius desperately needed the investment to succeed, so he could quietly pay back the $60,000 he'd stolen before Robert used it as leverage to expose him to Tiffany. It was a perfect, terrible trap. Bilal continued. And Robert was smart. He made Darius the point man on the entire plan. He forced Darius to be the one to pressure you and Denise. It was his insurance policy. By making Darius the face of the operation, Robert made him a full co-conspirator. Darius couldn't back out. He couldn't go to the police. He was trapped. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window of my suite and looked out over the glittering city. I thought of my son across town in that filthy motel room eating a peanut butter sandwich. He wasn't just paying the price. He was trapped in a prison he had built for himself bolt by bolt. He was a coward. He was a thief. He was an adulterer. And he was my son. I sat in my hotel room for a long time after I hung up with Bilal. I didn't move. The truth of what he'd told me was worse than any scenario I had imagined. My son. My son wasn't just weak. He wasn't just a victim. He was a thief. He was an adulterer. And he was a co-conspirator in a plan to destroy his own mother, blackmailed into it by the consequences of his own selfish, pathetic crimes. He had been standing right next to me on that porch, begging me not to destroy his family, not because he loved them, but because he was terrified they would expose him. I had to tell Denise, this truth. It belonged to her as much as it did to me. I drove back to the house. Our house. The Foundation's house. I found her in the study surrounded by boxes. She was packing up our personal lives, separating our 45 years of memories from what would now be an office. She looked up when I entered. The sadness was still there, but her hands were steady. She was working, moving forward. "What is it now, Malachi?" she asked. "More bad news. I'm not sure I have any space left for it." I sat down on the edge of the desk. "It's about Darius. It's the whole truth." I told her everything. I told her what Bilal had found, the affair with his colleague, the $60,000 in stolen company funds, the confrontation with Robert, and the mutual blackmail that had sealed all of our fates. I told her how our son had been trapped, but how he had been the one to build the trap himself. She listened. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. Her face just became still. A terrible, calm stillness that was far more frightening than her tears had been. When I finished, she was silent for a full minute. She just stared at the wall at a framed photo of a 9-year-old Darius holding a fishing rod. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew Robert was a criminal. He knew they were planning to use us. And he let it happen. He helped it happen. To save himself." "Denise," I started. "He was trapped. He was weak," she said, her voice cutting sharp. "He was a thief. And he was a coward." She stood up and looked at me. And then she said the one thing I hadn't prepared for. "And so were you, Malachi." I recoiled. What are you talking about? I just saved us." "Did you?" she said. "You just told me a story about your uncle, a man destroyed by money, a man who put a shotgun in his mouth because he thought he was nothing without it. And you've spent 45 years running from that ghost." "I was protecting us," I insisted. "I was protecting Darius." "No," she said, walking right up to me. "You were controlling us. You were protecting your secret. You were so afraid of what money could do, you never once trusted us with the truth. You treated me like a child, Malachi. You let me clip coupons. You let me worry about the mortgage. You let me live a lie just like Darius did. You're no different. You both lied to me to get what you wanted. He wanted money. You wanted to feel safe, to feel like you were in control." She was right. The revelation of my wealth hadn't been a moment of triumph. It had been a confession. A confession that I too had been lying to her for our entire marriage. She picked up a box of old photos. "I need time, Malachi. I can't be here." "What are you talking about?" I said, a new panic rising. "Where will you go? We can buy a new house, anywhere you want." "Buy," she said, the word sounding like a curse. "That's your answer to everything, isn't it? Buy, control, hide. No, I'm done being hidden." She set the box down. "This foundation, the Denise King Foundation, you put my name on it as a what? A gift, a monument, an apology." "Well, I'm taking it." I was confused. It's yours. It's ours." "No," she said. "It's mine. If my name is on the door, then I'm going to run it. For real. Not as your silent partner. As the president, the CEO. You can be on the board if you like, but I am in charge." I was stunned. This was not the woman who was crying on the balcony 3 days ago. "Our first project," she said, her eyes bright with a fire I hadn't seen since we were young, "is a girls' school in Kenya. I've been reading about it. They need funding. They need someone to actually show up." "Kenya," I stammered. You're going to Africa." "I am," she said. "I'm flying out on Friday. I'll be gone for 6 months, maybe longer. I need to not be your wife and to not be his mother. I just need to be Denise, for the first time in my life." She walked past me, leaving me standing alone in the middle of a room filled with the ghosts of our family. I was alone. For the first time in my life, I was truly, completely alone. Denise left 3 days later. I drove her to the airport. We didn't say much. When I tried to apologize again, she just put a hand on my arm. "Don't, Malachi. Words are cheap. I've had enough cheap words to last a lifetime. Just run the fund. I'll be in touch." I watched her walk to the security gate, her back straight, not looking back. I went back to the house, the empty, silent house. The staff was there working for the foundation, but they were strangers. I would sit in my armchair, the same one I'd sat in that first morning, and just think. Denise was right. I had been a coward. I was so terrified of Darius becoming my Uncle Leon, a man destroyed by wealth, that I never stopped to think about the alternative. My silence, my protection, hadn't been a shield. It had been a cage. It had created a vacuum in my son. I had taught him that our life, our modest, hard-working life, was the only life. I hadn't taught him why. I hadn't taught him about character, about integrity, because I myself was hiding a massive secret. I had made him ashamed of our simple life. I had made him the perfect hungry target for the first people who flashed a little wealth and power. I had been so busy protecting him from my money, I had failed to protect him from his own lack of character. I had failed. As a husband, as a father. I had all the money in the world, and my wife was on the other side of the planet, my son was lost in the gutter, and my in-laws were in jail. A week later, I did something I didn't know I was going to do. I drove to the county jail. I sat in the visitation room separated by thick glass. Robert Sterling was let in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a gray, defeated emptiness. He sat down. He didn't look at me. "You're not on my visitors list," he mumbled. "I own the prison's food supplier," I said. "They make exceptions." He finally looked up. His eyes were dead. "What? You here to gloat, old man? Here to watch me rot?" "No," I said. "I'm here for an answer. You were already finished. The pension fund fraud was enough to put you away for 20 years. You didn't need my house. You didn't need to involve my family." I leaned closer to the glass. "So why my son? Why did you have to pull Darius into your filth?" Robert stared at me. A long, slow, hateful stare. And then for the first time he smiled. It was a horrible, yellow-toothed smile. "Why?" he rasped. "You really want to know why?" "Because he was easy." He leaned forward, his face close to the glass, his eyes filled with venom. "Because the moment I offered him a taste of the good life, he folded. Because he was weak. Because he was greedy. Because he was desperate to be anything other than you." He tapped the glass with a dirty fingernail. "Because he's just like me, Malachi, weak and greedy, and you're the one who made him that way." Robert's words were a nail in the coffin of the man I thought I was. Weak and greedy. And you're the one who made him that way. I walked out of that jail. I didn't go back to the hotel. I drove to the house. The house. I let myself in with my new key and sat in the dark living room just as I had that first morning. But this time I wasn't waiting for my wife to wake up. I was just sitting. Denise was right. My Uncle Leon had been destroyed by money. So I had built a wall of lies to protect my son from it. But the wall didn't protect him. It just kept him ignorant. It kept him weak. I had raised a 40-year-old child, a man with no spine, no character, no understanding of the real world. And the moment a predator like Robert Sterling had sensed that weakness, he had pounced. I hadn't protected my son. I had prepared him for slaughter. I threw myself into the only thing I had left. The foundation. A year passed. That house, 788 Inman Park Drive, was no longer a home. It was unrecognizable. The soft carpets were gone, replaced by durable commercial flooring. The living room where Tiffany had preened and Darius had laughed was now an intake center with sterile desks and partitions. My old study was the legal aid office. The dining room, the one where we'd shared 45 years of Thanksgiving dinners, was now the main boardroom dominated by a massive polished mahogany table. The Denise King Foundation was no longer just an idea, it was a force. It was a thriving, aggressive nonprofit with a staff of 12, a team of pro bono lawyers, and a waiting list of women who, like Denise, had been made to feel small and were now learning to fight back. I was on the board. I was the treasurer. I was the vault. I signed the checks. I reviewed the portfolios. I was the silent, massive engine of money behind it all. But I was not in charge. The president and CEO was Denise. I hadn't seen her in 364 days. We spoke twice a week via video conference. Her in a makeshift office in Nairobi, me in the boardroom that used to be our life. Her calls were brief, professional, and decisive. She was no longer the woman who cried on the balcony. She was a woman who gave orders. She was a woman who was building schools, funding shelters, and changing laws. She had found her purpose in the ashes of our family. I drove to the airport to pick her up. I stood at the international arrivals gate feeling a nervousness I hadn't felt in decades. I didn't know who was going to walk through those doors. The woman who walked out was not the woman who had left. The Denise who left was a 69-year-old retired teacher, her graying hair pulled back in a simple bun, her eyes always slightly downcast, afraid. The woman who returned, she was magnificent. She wore white linen pants, a brightly colored Kenyan dashiki, and her hair was cut short, framing a face that was confident and strong. She walked with a speed and a purpose that made people move out of her way. She wasn't just confident, she was powerful. She saw me waiting and didn't run. She didn't even smile at first. She just walked straight up to me, her eyes clear and level with mine. "Malachi," she said. Her voice was rich, steady. "Denise," I replied. "You look incredible." "I feel incredible," she said. She didn't offer a hug. She offered a handshake. I took it. Her grip was firm. "The school in Nairobi is fully funded. We broke ground on the dormitory last week. The girls are asking for a computer lab next." We drove back. The silence in the car wasn't the heavy, agonizing silence of our last days together. It was a new silence. It was professional. It was respectful. We weren't a broken couple. We were colleagues. I the man with the money. She the woman with the vision. She was the CEO. I was just a member of her board. 2 weeks later, we were in our first in-person board meeting. Sitting at the long table in our old dining room, Denise was at the head of the table, commanding the room, discussing the budget for the next quarter. I sat at the far end listening. The staff, lawyers, accountants, the new program director all looked to her. She was in her element. She was a leader. In the middle of her presentation on a new microloan initiative, there was a knock. It wasn't on the front door. It was on the side door, the old service entrance by the kitchen. It was hesitant, almost a scratch. Denise paused, annoyed. "Mike," she said to the security manager at the back of the room, "can you see who that is? We are not accepting walk-ins today. Tell them to schedule an appointment." Mike nodded and left the room. We heard the side door open. We heard a muffled male voice, low, pleading. Then Mike's firm response. "I'm sorry, sir, you can't be here. You need to leave." The man's voice rose slightly, just enough for us to hear. "Please, I just need to talk to her, to one of them. Please." Denise sighed, frustrated by the interruption. "Mike, what is it?" Mike reappeared in the doorway. He looked deeply uncomfortable. His face was pale. "Mrs. King," he said, his voice low. There's a man here. He's asking to see you, or Mr. King. He says it's personal." "I'm in a board meeting," Denise said, her voice sharp. "Tell him to leave. If he refuses, call the police." "Ma'am," Mike said, taking a step into the room, I think you need to see him. It's Darius King." The room went completely still. Every person at that table knew the story. They knew who Darius was. Denise's face hardened, not with sadness, with anger. "Tell him to leave." "Ma'am," Mike insisted. He doesn't look good. I stood up. The entire room turned to look at me. "I'll handle this," I said. I walked out of the boardroom through the kitchen that was now a break room and toward the side door. I prepared myself for what I would find. The begging, the anger, the smell of alcohol, the excuses. I opened the door. The man standing on the back steps was not the man I had seen at the warehouse. He was thinner, impossibly thin. The year had carved deep lines into his face, but he was clean. His hair was cut short. He was clean-shaven. He wore a threadbare but clean pair of jeans and a simple blue work shirt. He was holding a worn-out baseball cap in his hands, twisting at his knuckles white. He wasn't drunk, he wasn't high, he just looked terrified. When he saw me, he flinched, physically recoiled as if he expected me to strike him, but he held his ground. "Hello, Dad," he said. His voice was a raspy whisper. "Why are you here, Darius?" I asked. He stared at his worn-out boots. He took a shaky breath. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm not here to ask for money. I swear." He looked up and his eyes met mine. They were clear and sober and filled with a terror that went beyond just seeing me. "I heard," he said, his voice cracking. "I saw the sign out front, the foundation. I heard you're helping people." "We are," I said, my voice hard, "but not people like you." "I know," he said, quickly stumbling over his words. "I know, I'm not asking for that kind of help." He took another shaky breath. "I'm here to ask for a job." I just stared at him. "A job?" "Yes, sir," he said. "I've been working, loading docks, construction, whatever pays cash, whatever. But I heard the plumbing in the main floor bathroom is backed up. I know how to fix pipes. I know this house. I can work. I'll do whatever you need. Maintenance, janitorial, sweeping the walk, anything, please." I stared at my son, this stranger standing on the back steps of a house he once thought was his, begging for a job sweeping floors. Before I could answer, a voice cut through the air, a voice I had not heard in person for a full year. "What is he doing here?" Denise was standing in the kitchen doorway. She had her arms crossed, her face was unreadable. The CEO, not the wife. Darius flinched, his eyes darting to her, then immediately back to the ground. "Mrs. King," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I was just asking Mr. King. I'm looking for work. I know how to fix things. The plumbing and I know what's wrong with my plumbing." Denise cut him off. She looked at Mike, our security manager, who was still standing nearby. "Mike, please go back to the boardroom. Malachi and I will handle this." Mike nodded and disappeared, leaving the three of us in the cold, silent kitchen. The ruins of our family. Denise walked over to the coffee machine and poured herself a cup. She didn't offer one to me. She didn't offer one to him. She took a sip. "You're looking for work," she stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." "You have experience." I worked at Sterling Innovations," he stammered. "As an accountant," Denise said, her voice flat. "We don't need an accountant. We have a team of them. They are very good. They don't steal." Darius winced as if she had slapped him the way Tiffany had. He said nothing. "I also have experience," he said, his voice low. "Loading trucks. Construction. I can paint. I can do drywall. I can fix the pipes." Denise looked at him for a long, hard moment. I could see the calculation in her eyes. The conflict. The mother versus the CEO. The CEO won. "We have a position," she said. "General maintenance. Janitorial." I almost spoke. Janitorial, I stopped myself. This was her foundation, her decision. "The pay," Denise continued, "is minimum wage, $10 an hour, no benefits. You are an at-will employee. You report to Mike, the head of operations. You will not report to me. You will not speak to me. You will not speak to Mr. King. You will be here at 7 a.m. You will leave at 4 p.m. You will not enter the main house unless it is for a specific documented repair. Is that clear?" Darius's head snapped up. He looked not angry, not humiliated. He looked grateful, like a drowning man who had just been thrown a piece of driftwood. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice thick. "Thank you, ma'am. That is perfectly clear." "Then be here tomorrow at 7, she said. "Use the service entrance. Do not knock on this door again." She turned, walked out of the kitchen, and went back to her board meeting without a second glance. Darius stood there twisting his hat. He looked at me, his eyes brimming with 1,000 questions. "She said 7 a.m., I said gruffly. "Don't be late." "Yes, sir," he whispered. He turned and walked away. And so it began. For the next 6 months, I watched my son become a ghost in his own childhood home. I say I watched, but Denise and we observed, from a distance, from the windows of the study, from the security cameras. We never spoke about it. We discussed the foundation's budget, the school in Kenya, the new legal cases, but we never ever spoke about the man who arrived every morning on the bus wearing work boots and carrying a metal lunch pail. He did his job. He did it without a single word of complaint. I watched him spend a whole day in the crawl space fixing the pipes that had been leaking for years, the same pipes I had asked him to look at when he was still playing the part of the successful son. He came out covered in filth, but the pipes were fixed. I watched him mow the lawn, the same lawn he had tried to seize. I watched him eat his lunch, a sandwich and an apple, alone on the back steps. The staff was polite to him, but distant. They all knew the story. They knew who he was. He was a pariah, a living, breathing cautionary tale. He was the first to arrive, the last to leave. He never asked for more money. He never asked for a different job. He just worked. He was paying his price, just as he said. One day, I saw him in the yard raking leaves. Denise was in the boardroom, which had a large window overlooking that part of the lawn. She thought I couldn't see her, but I did. She stood at that window for almost 10 minutes just watching him work. Her face was a mask. When she finally turned away, she wiped something from her eye. Winter came again. It was almost Christmas, a full year since that horrible night. I was in the office late reviewing the year-end reports for Apex. The building was empty. Denise was at a fundraising dinner. I heard a sound in the main foyer, the sound of a mop bucket. I walked out of the study. There was Darius mopping the marble floor. It was 8 o'clock at night. "You're working late," I said. He jumped, startled. "Mr. King, sir, Mike asked me to strip and wax the floors. The salt from the snow has been making a mess. I thought I'd do it tonight when no one was around." "I see," I said. "Carry on." I was about to turn and go back to my office when the front doors of the foundation burst open. The night air swirled in cold and sharp, and with it came a woman. "I know he's in here. Don't touch me." It was Tiffany. Mike, the security guard, was right behind her trying to grab her arm. "Ma'am, you are trespassing. I'm calling the police." But Tiffany didn't look at Mike. She didn't look at me. She just stared at Darius, who stood there frozen, holding a dirty mop. I didn't recognize her. The woman from the porch was gone. This woman was gaunt. Her hair was a brassy, damaged blonde. She wore a thin, dirty coat, and she was holding a baby carrier in one hand. The baby inside was fussing. She looked at Darius. She looked at the mop. She looked at the bucket of gray water, and she laughed. It was a horrible, dry, cracked laugh. "Oh my God," she said, her voice a rasp. "Look at you, just look at you, the great Darius King, the heir to the Apex Fund. You're a janitor." Darius just stood there. "You need to leave, Tiffany. You're not allowed here." "Not allowed," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the large, empty room. "I came to save you. I came to get you, but you're mopping floors." She stepped closer, her eyes wild. "Are you insane? Do you know what they did to us? They destroyed us. That witch." She pointed toward the study where she thought Denise was. "She stole our life. This is your house, Darius. That's your money. Your father is a billionaire, and you are mopping his floors." "It's not my house," Darius said, his voice quiet. Don't be a fool, she spat. He's just testing you. She's testing you. Stop being a coward. Stop being weak. She grabbed his arm, her fingernails digging into his work shirt. Darius, listen to me. Kick her out. Kick him out. Take what is yours. We can still have it all. We can sue them. We can tell the world what they did. What we did, you mean, Darius said. It doesn't matter, she screamed. Darius, please. I have nothing. Harrison's in jail. My parents won't even speak to me. I'm living in a shelter with his baby. She shook the carrier. Please, Darius. Just be a man for once in your life. Fight. Take it all back for us. She was panting, her face inches from his, her eyes filled with a desperate, greedy light. Darius looked at her. He looked at the screaming, desperate woman. He looked at the crying child. He looked at the life he had chosen, the life that had destroyed him. Then he slowly, deliberately pulled his arm from her grasp. He leaned the mop against the wall. He straightened up. He was thin, yes, but for the first time he looked tall. It was never my house, Tiffany, he said, his voice clear and steady. It was his. Now it's hers. I was never the heir. I was just a disappointment. But, she stammered, confused by his calm. I am not the janitor, Darius said. He looked at her, his eyes finally clear. I am a janitor. And for the first time in my entire life, Tiffany, I am actually working. He took a step back, picked up his mop, and dipped it into the bucket. You need to go, he said, not looking at her. You need to go away. And you need to never, ever come back. He turned his back on her. He turned his back on the baby, on the past, on the greed, and on the lie. And he started mopping the floor. Tiffany's departure left a void in the foyer. The sound of her screams faded down the street, and all that was left was the hum of the computers in the study and the quiet, rhythmic thud, thud, thud of Darius's mop against the marble floor. He didn't look up. He didn't acknowledge me. He just continued his work. His shoulders set his movements methodical. He was scrubbing away the last remnants of the life that had just imploded. I turned away and walked back to my office. 6 months passed. The world moved on. Robert and Barbara Sterling were convicted. Robert got 10 years for embezzlement and securities fraud. Barbara got 3 years for conspiracy. Tiffany, having lost everything, disappeared completely. We heard rumors she had moved back west, living with a distant relative, the baby adopted by a family in another state. And Darius worked. He arrived every morning at 6:55 a.m. on the bus. He clocked in, he fixed the leaking faucets, he replaced the old electrical sockets, he repainted the walls of the foundation, transforming our old home into a professional, welcoming space. He ate his lunch alone on the back steps. He clocked out at 4 p.m. He never spoke unless spoken to. He never asked for a raise. He never asked for a favor. He just worked. He was paying his price. Denise and I found a new rhythm. We were partners now in a way we had never been before. She was the heart and soul of the foundation. I was the silent engine managing the Apex fund that kept it all running. We had meetings. We discussed budgets. We were polite, respectful colleagues who happened to live in the same penthouse apartment nearby. The ice was thawing, but the breach was still there. Then Christmas came again. 2 years to the day since that first horrible night. The house 788 Inman Park Drive was alive, but this time it was not with the sounds of betrayal. It was filled with light, with music, and with the most influential people in Atlanta. The Denise King Foundation was hosting its first annual fundraising gala. I stood at the back of the room that used to be my living room, holding a glass of sparkling water. I watched my wife. My God, I watched my wife. Denise stood at a podium bathed in a soft spotlight. She wore an elegant dark blue gown, her short gray hair framing her face. She was radiant. She was commanding. She was thanking the donors, the mayor, the senators, the CEOs who had come to support her cause. This foundation, she said, her voice clear and strong, resonating through the crowded room, is built on a simple idea, that it is never too late to rebuild, that it is never too late to find your strength. This very house is a symbol of that. It was once a place of pain, a place of secrets. Now it is a place of healing, a place where women who have been silenced, ignored, and abused can find their voice. She paused, taking a sip of water. But this work is not done alone. It takes a dedicated, tireless staff, people who believe in the mission, People who show up every single day in the heat and in the cold. People who fix what is broken. She looked toward the back of the room near the service door. Our work over the past 6 months would have been impossible without the dedication of our new facilities manager, a man who has personally repaired every broken pipe, rewired every faulty light, and repainted every wall in this building. A man who has worked tirelessly without complaint and with more dedication than I have ever seen. The room followed her gaze. Darius was standing by the door. He was wearing a simple black suit. It was probably the only one he owned. It was clean, it was pressed, but it was not expensive. He looked thin, but he stood tall. When he realized she was talking about him, he tensed his face pale. Denise smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Please join me in thanking my son Darius King." The room erupted in applause. It was a polite, knowing applause. Everyone in this city knew the story. They knew the scandal. They knew what he had done. And now they were seeing the result of that public humiliation. Darius didn't walk forward. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He just looked at his mother across the crowded room, his eyes brimming with a lifetime of pain and shame and a flicker of something new. Gratitude. He nodded just once. A short, respectful acknowledgement. Denise nodded back. It was not forgiveness. It was not an embrace. It was an acknowledgement. A start. Later that night, the gala was over. The last donor had left. The staff was cleaning up. Denise and I found ourselves on the balcony. The same balcony. It was cold again. But this time we were both standing there together looking out at the old oak tree. I had asked Darius to put the Christmas lights back on it, the same simple white lights Denise had been staring at 2 years ago. We stood in silence for a long time, sipping brandy. The sounds of the city felt distant. "You were incredible tonight, Denise," I said, my voice quiet. "You raised over $500,000 in one night." She smiled, a real smile this time. "We raised at Malachi. The Apex Fund matching grant didn't hurt." "Still," I said, "you've built something real here. You're helping people." "So are you," she replied. She looked at me. "Your Uncle Leon, he would be proud. You didn't let the money destroy you." "It almost did," I said. "It almost destroyed everything." I paused, gathering my courage. I looked at Darius, who was visible below helping the catering staff load their truck. He was doing his job. "That was a powerful thing you did," I said, acknowledging him like that, in front of everyone. Denise watched him, her face soft in the glow of the Christmas lights. "He earned it. He hasn't missed a day. He hasn't made an excuse. He hasn't asked for a single thing." "No, he hasn't," I agreed. I looked at my wife, the woman I had lied to for 45 years, the woman who had found a strength I never knew she possessed. "Do you forgive him, Denise?" I asked, the question that had been hanging between us for a year. "Can you—" She didn't answer right away. She continued to watch Darius, who was now picking up a piece of trash that had blown onto the lawn. "Forgive," she said, testing the word. "That's such a simple word for such a complicated thing. I don't know Malachi. I look at him and I don't see the man who stood on that lawn screaming with Tiffany. I don't see the boy who betrayed me." She sighed, a cloud of breath in the cold air. "I just see a man who is trying every single day to be better than he was. He's paying a price I didn't ask him to pay. He's paying it to himself. How can you not respect that?" She turned to me. "I spent a year in Africa, Malachi. I watched women who had lost everything, their husbands, their children, their homes, build new lives from nothing. Forgiveness, it isn't a switch you flip. It's not a destination you arrive at. It's a journey, a long, hard, painful journey." She looked back down at Darius. I'm on the journey, but he's doing so well, Malachi. He really is. And this time he's doing it all by himself." I looked at my son stacking chairs in the cold, and I looked at my wife, this powerful, incredible woman beside me. And I finally understood what Robert had never learned, what Tiffany could never comprehend. I reached out and took her hand. It was strong and warm. "No," I said. "He's not doing it by himself." Denise looked at me, her eyes questioning. "This time," I said, squeezing her hand, "he has us. Both of us, honestly. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she squeezed my hand back. We stood there on the balcony under the Christmas lights. We weren't the rich man with the secret. We weren't the broken, crying wife. We weren't the victims of a greedy plot. We were just Malachi and Denise, partners. And for the first time in our long, complicated lives, there were no more secrets. This story is a powerful lesson in the consequences of secrets and the true meaning of strength. Malachi's secret, intended to protect his son from the curse of wealth, instead made Darius weak, resentful, and ashamed, turning him into a perfect target for the greed of his in-laws. It shows that hiding the truth, even for good intentions, often creates the very weakness we fear. The story also teaches that a life built on deceit and materialism, like Tiffany's and Robert's, will inevitably collapse. True wealth was not the money Malachi had hidden, but the integrity Denise found and the dignity Darius had to earn back through hard, honest work. What would you have done in Malachi's place? Let me know in the comments below.